As the title of the presentation suggests, today we will be talking about pedagogical and proactive approaches in terms of promoting academic integrity. Of course, in your introduction, Volodymyr, you mentioned problems. Of course, there are some problems, but when it comes to academic integrity, rather than focusing on academic misconduct, we'd like to focus more on academic integrity, how to promote academic integrity. I mean, we'd like to approach the issue from a positive perspective. That's why we will be prioritizing here pedagogical and proactive approaches. Let me mention about my outline, what I'll be doing here today. First, I'll try to define what we understand from academic integrity. I'll do this with reference to fundamental values of academic integrity. And then I'd like to illustrate the issues involved in developing academic integrity policies. There are some cultural implications that we need to take into consideration here. And especially in terms of relating it with pedagogical approaches, I'd like to mention more about teaching writing, teaching academic writing in terms of prevention of plagiarism. In this respect, I'd like to provide some clues about process writing approach in which we include feedback exchange. Then I'll introduce anonymous multimediated writing model, and then I'll also introduce our materials that we prepared as European Network for Academic Integrity. Of course, at the end of the session, if you have any questions, I'll try to answer your questions. Otherwise, if there are any urgent issues, please stop me and ask your questions during the presentation. Okay, then, let's try to clarify what we understand from academic integrity, how we can define academic integrity. I'll try to provide a definition that's coming from our network, European Network for Academic Integrity. And in our glossary, how do we define academic integrity? It is compliance with ethical and professional principles, standards, practices, and consistent system of values that serves as guidance for making decisions and taking actions in education, research, and scholarship. So it means that academic integrity is related to any educational institution. We cannot restrict academic integrity only with universities. We also need to cover K-12 education here. Any academic activity, including research or scholarship, should be covered here. And we are talking about consistent practices. So where do these consistent practices come from? They'll be coming from, ideally, from the policies, from well-developed policies. Today, I'll be talking about this policy development. But before we move forward, I'd like to call your attention to the fundamental values of academic integrity. This time, I'll be referring to International Center for Academic Integrity and what they say about these fundamental values. There are 6 fundamental values that are acknowledged here. These are honesty, trust, fairness, respect, responsibility, and courage. Courage here, to my understanding, functions as the sub-skills. I know as educationalist, you are involved also in language teaching. So when it comes to language teaching, for example, we talk about 4 main language skills: reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And we consider vocabulary and grammar as sub-language skills. Here, to my understanding, courage functions as a sub-skill, supporting the other 5 values of 5 fundamental values of academic integrity. Because, for example, in order to be honest, sometimes first you need to have some courage. Otherwise, you cannot be honest. Therefore, it might be a good replication to relate courage with sub-language or sub-language skills here. But what about the development of policies? Before we develop academic integrity policies, we need to acknowledge that academic integrity is a complex phenomenon. Here I'll be referring to Tracy Bretak, and what she says about this. At first glance, academic integrity appears to be a relatively easy topic to address. However, it is a very complex, interdisciplinary field of research requiring input from educational stakeholders from around the globe. So indeed, Tracy is illustrating the idea behind European Network for Academic Integrity. We established European Network for Academic Integrity because as academics from different parts of Europe, we believe that we need cooperation. We need to cooperate in order to overcome the difficulties that we are experiencing in terms of promoting academic integrity and preventing academic misconduct. Okay, academic integrity development is related to academic integrity culture, institutional cultures. And such cultural values are supposed to be related to individual values. However, these individual values will be constituting the institution's views and institutional values there when it comes to when the policies are developed. And here it is important to cover any type of educational operation within this perspective. I mean, both in terms of developing a culture of academic integrity and later relating it with the values. Of course, by the help of developing these policies and establishing this culture, the main aim is increasing the quality of the education. This will be possible by creating an atmosphere of trust at the institutional level. So that's why we basically need academic integrity policies. But it should be remembered that policy documents are summative by nature. Although they are providing some frameworks with reference to some casual links, we need to understand that they require adaptation. So there might be some slight differences considering the needs of the institutions, individual needs of the institutions within these policies. Therefore, institutions who would like to develop their own policies first are recommended to conduct need analysis and then identify the weaknesses or maybe the issues that should be promoted, and then develop the policies by taking the other policies into consideration. What should be the components of a well-developed policy then? Within this perspective, all stakeholders should be taken into consideration. What do I mean by stakeholder here? For example, as an academic, I must be considered as a stakeholder, a student, a researcher, a librarian, administrative staff. They should all be considered as stakeholders there. And then there should be some pedagogical issues in terms of teaching academic integrity. And then in case of academic misconduct, how the investigations will be carried out for suspected cases, and what if there are any violations, what sanctions will follow. These are the essential issues should be covered in academic integrity policies. I'll try to provide three common approaches that are valid for the academic integrity policies available right now. Mainly, unfortunately, we see that these policies mainly focus on sanctions. What do we mean by focusing on sanctions? These policies either try to detect and then suggest appropriate sanctions for any type of academic misconduct. Of course, standardizing these procedures, they are also important, but more importantly for us, when we are talking about from an educational perspective, it should have a preventive role. So that's why we are talking about proactive policies here. Before I move forward to proactive policies, I'd like to call your attention to two related terminologies: academic misconduct or academic malpractice. We'll be using them as interchangeable here. These are the actions that are used to gain unfair academic advantage by the member of the academic community. So we are talking about unfair academic advantages when we deal with academic misconduct. What are the samples of academic misconduct, especially if you are talking about student assignments, or student achievement, then plagiarism, contract cheating, collision, or cheating by copying on tests. These are the first academic misconduct samples that come to our mind. Of course, there are some other many other types of academic misconduct, especially considering the research. There will be many other types, and I'll kindly suggest you to refer to our glossary to familiarize yourself with the other types of academic misconduct. And we try to prevent academic misconduct because we believe that academic misconduct may result in corruption. So it starts with cheating, it becomes deception at the second level, and then becomes fraud. And unfortunately, if no precautions are taken into consideration, unfortunately, it may result in corruption, which might have a wider impact on the society. Therefore, we need to find ways, and as educators, we need to find some pedagogical ways in order to increase awareness for academic integrity, in order to promote academic integrity. Now, what about the policies? As I said previously, mainly policies are either detective or reactive. I mean, they try to solve how we can detect, for example, if you are talking about plagiarism, how we can detect plagiarism. Okay, let's benefit from text matching software. So, benefiting from text matching software, does this solve the problem? To some extent. I'll try to illustrate what I mean by to some extent in my later slides. And secondly, if we reveal, for example, any academic misconduct, if we detect any plagiarism in student assignment, what should be our reaction to this academic misconduct? Now we are talking about sanctions. Shall we ignore it? Or shall we, for example, fail the student, ask the student to repeat the class? Of course, there will be a wide range of different sanctions, and some policies are trying to illustrate and standardize these sanctions. However, more importantly for us, we need to approach the issue from a pedagogical approach, which means that we should have a proactive stance, a preventive stance here. I mean, how we can prevent plagiarism rather than detecting it, how we can prevent it. So education plays an important role here, and I'll try to show you a few hints in terms of, especially if you are talking about focusing on mainly plagiarism here, how we can do this by focusing on plagiarism. I'd like to discriminate accidental plagiarism at this point from intentional plagiarism. What do we mean by accidental plagiarism? If you are considering pedagogical approach, we should be very careful about before a simple accusation of plagiarism for any student assignment. So we need to understand the reasons behind plagiarism, for example, especially if we are talking about first-year university students. And if we are asking them for the first time to write an academic paper, then they might be following through the procedure that we call as patch writing. Patch writing is considered a form of plagiarism. However, for some people, it is also considered as a strategy. So a strategy showing the development level of in the academic writing classes. What happens in patch writing? Students try to paraphrase expressions. However, since they are very innovative authors, they cannot do this properly. They cannot, for example, restructure the sentence because of their weakness in the target language. This might be another failure. Or they cannot find alternative synonyms to be replaced in the expressions. So they just change a few words in it, which is called as patch writing. Or they bring expressions from several sources to each other and then make them fit each other and then present it. This is also called as patch writing. Of course, for academic writing, it is not acceptable. However, if we are talking about the early stages of students learning academic principles of academic writing, it could be understandable. Therefore, this could be considered as accidental plagiarism. I mean, no bad intentions. However, because of the weaknesses in the target language or in academic writing principles. However, when it comes to intentional plagiarism, then the students' intentions, some bad intentions, for example, might be having other roles here. If you are talking about contract cheating, what we mean by contract cheating, as the lecturer, I assign a written paper. The student find an essay mill on the internet, gives the topic, and then asks them to write the paper, paste them, and then get the assignment, buy the assignment, and then submit it to the lecturer. This is contract cheating. Or collision. This time, what happens in collision? It is an individual work. However, the student asks another student, an older student, for example, in the other class, to write the assignment for that student, and then submit as if his or her own assignment. Both cannot be acceptable. I mean, if student has an intention of collision or contract cheating, it means that this is an intentional type of plagiarism. Of course, referring to the reasons of plagiarizers, why they are doing this. Okay, they might be saying, for example, I had very limited time. I felt stressed. There are very common excuses of plagiarizers. However, anyway, this cannot be acceptable. We believe that intentional plagiarism is an ethical issue. However, we shouldn't restrict even intentional plagiarism with ethical issues. Again, we need to find ways for these people to change their behaviors, because when we check the relevant literature, we see that some plagiarizers later then becomes good academic writers. So by the help of pedagogical approaches, it is possible to teach academic writing skills or adopt these people academic writing skills. However, we need to benefit from good pedagogical approaches there. What about the pedagogical approaches here? Here especially, for example, I am working at the Department of English Language Teaching at a university in Turkey. What does it mean? I'm asking my students to write assignments in English. English is their foreign language. So I'm asking people to write an assignment in a foreign language. It is a very challenging task. So when we are assessing their assignments, we should take this into consideration. Asking someone to write other than a language, other than the first language. This is a very important discrimination. So identity, students' identity, or before this session, I had the opportunity to talk to Volodymyr about intercultural communication. So cultural beliefs and background knowledge, they will be playing some other important roles here. So in terms of understanding plagiarism and behind the reasons behind plagiarism, we need to also consider these issues, socio-cultural issues here. For our classes, of course, it's possible to benefit from technology. I mean, there are some tools available on the internet. For example, especially for postgraduate students, it could be ideal to encourage them to benefit from citation or knowledge managers such as Stałої and Not or Mendeley here. Or in terms of developing their paraphrasing skills, we may ask them to benefit from some corpuses. For example, word and phrase, to my experience, works properly with students in terms of paraphrasing, because it will be providing synonyms there from the corpuses. And in terms of criticizing their own writing and understanding the readability, we can ask them to calculate readability scores. They can do this even by using Microsoft Word. And ideally for teachers, for lecturers, it could be a very good opportunity to benefit from text matching software. However, implementing text matching software into your curriculum will not solve the problem of plagiarism. It will just change the direction. So in addition to implementing text matching software, we need to adopt some good pedagogical perspectives. And another reminder, there are some freely available open so-called plagiarism detectors. I don't like the term plagiarism detector. Instead, we call them as text matching software, because any tool, any online tool, cannot detect plagiarism. They can show similarities, but cannot detect plagiarism. So we are calling them as text matching software. And on the internet, there are some tools claiming that they are showing plagiarism or similarities. However, be careful. Some of them might be cooperating with third-party essay mills. So it may not be a good idea to ask our students to copy their papers before submitting it to the lecturer, to copy their papers to the free tools, free so-called plagiarism detectors available on the internet, because their essays might be submitted to essay mills. And we should avoid over-dependence on text matching software to detect and prevent plagiarism. Now I'm moving to approaches. We are talking about pedagogical approaches, and especially when it comes to teaching writing, what approaches do we take into consideration here? I'll specifically discriminate product approach from process approach here. In product approach, our aim is focusing on the students' submitted assignment. It derives some principles from behaviorism. And our expectation from the learners is they will be mimicking some model text. However, when it comes to process approach, this time we try to understand how the students move through writing process. There will be several drafts, exchanging ideas, generation of the ideas. So as teachers, we will not be simply focusing on the submitted assignment. Instead, we will try to see how the students will be processing information throughout the process here. And here, multiple drafts will be playing a very important role, and we will be referring to scaffolding. Actually, scaffolding benefits some ideas from Vygotsky views, and students will be helping each other to become better writers, especially by the help of exchanging peer feedback. However, in process writing, there are some issues that we need to take into consideration. For example, if we are asking our students to write assignments, who is going to assign the topic? The teacher? Is it the teacher's responsibility, or will we ask our students to choose topics freely? If we are assigning the topic, what about students' familiarity with the topic? And if we are assigning the topic, what about the sources? Will we be giving the sources that should be benefited? Of course, any approach could be followed, but for more controlled practices, for example, in my classes, I start with lecture assigned topic. I deliver the sources to my students so that I try to control how they practice in-text citation skills. And then for the further semesters, I ask them to choose their own topics and then to find relevant, reliable sources from the internet or from the library. And what about the length? What about the duration? And when it comes to feedback, who is going to provide the feedback? Will you ask students to exchange peer feedback? As teacher, when will you provide feedback? And how will you encourage them to follow the principles of academic integrity? This is important. Be careful. It is quite important to plan this process very carefully, otherwise it wouldn't work. Here I try to illustrate the basic process, basic steps involved in process approach, such as choosing the topic, narrowing down the topic, brainstorming on it, obtaining relevant information either from the library or from the internet, preparing the outline first, submitting the first draft, submitting the second draft, if necessary, third or forthcoming drafts, and then focusing on mechanical mistakes, proofreading, and submitting the final version. And feedback. Where do we ask our students to benefit from feedback? For example, in my classes, after students submit their first draft, I match them with each other. I'm going to illustrate how I match them with each other, and I ask them to exchange peer feedback. This is scaffolding. Also, after submitting their second draft, as the lecturer, I provide feedback about their paper and then ask them go through the mechanical mistakes and submit the final version. When we check the relevant literature, we see that feedback contributes. Feedback, exchanging peer feedback, does not only contribute to the student who is receiving the feedback. It also contributes to the student who is providing feedback. Because students will be changing their roles. They will become like teachers criticizing student papers. So It also, especially for the schools training teachers, such as Faculty of Education, for example, it has some additional features preparing future teachers by asking them to provide peer feedback. And when we check the relevant literature, I listed several theories. I'm not going to talk about these theories, but I listed several theories here which might be contributing to the effectiveness of peer feedback here. So indeed, we have good theoretical background for asking our students to exchange peer feedback. However, there are two main problems that I experience with both my students and identify from the relevant literature when we ask our students to exchange peer feedback. What is the first problem? We are matching students. And suppose, for example, I am a poor student and Volodymyr is a good student. The teacher matches two of us. As a poor student, I am happy because a good student will be providing feedback to me. So it means that I will be able to improve my writing. However, what about for you, Volodymyr? Probably you will receive very low quality feedback because I am not very good at writing. So we are talking about here lack of trust in peer feedback. And second problem, we are good friends. If I criticize my friend's paper, then how would this impact our social relationships? This is so reluctance to criticize friends is the second problem. So what do? I developed a model, a writing model that I call as anonymous multimediated writing model. And in this model, I ask my students to exchange peer feedback anonymously. So they don't know whose paper they are providing feedback, and when they receive the feedback, they don't know who provides the feedback. And I divide my students, let's say, for example, I have 90 students taking my class. I divide them into three groups, 30, 30, 30. What does it mean? 30 who are good at writing, 30 who are poor at writing, and 30 in the middle. When I match them to exchange peer feedback, I do not match students. I match one student's paper with one student from each group. So it means that every student will be receiving feedback from a good peer, from a poor peer, and from a moderate peer, which is quite similar to what happens when we submit an article, a manuscript, to a journal. We receive criticism from several reviewers, and then the editor sends them to us, and then we criticize them. We don't necessarily take every suggestion into consideration. Sometimes we say that, okay, there is some misunderstanding by the reviewer, so I reject changing anything. That is what I do in my classes. They receive feedback. Now I ask them to be critical with the feedback that they receive. This also contributes to the development of metacognitive, self-regulation skills, and then they decide whether to take any action related to the feedback or not. If they are not taking any action, they provide an explanation. I am not correcting, I am not changing anything because this is wrong feedback, or there is something wrong here. Or if they are changing it, they submit the drafts accordingly. So they first submit their draft and then exchange peer feedback, revise their paper, and then resubmit their paper. Of course, it is possible to integrate teacher feedback into this model, but I'm just illustrating exchanging peer feedback here. And another important component here, discriminating product and process approaches, summative assessment or dynamic assessment. We can ask students to be part of the assessment procedure. How do I do this? This time I try to benefit from rubrics. I developed my own rubric, and it is very good opportunity for instructors or for institutions to develop their own rubrics. However, I don't use, this is the rubric that I developed. I don't use this rubric only for assessment purposes. I also share this rubric with my students and explain every item to them, and then ask them to exchange peer feedback by using this rubric. So they will be paying attention to the criteria, to my criteria here in the rubric, and then provide peer feedback. So for exchanging peer feedback, we need to ask them. We need to show the specific ways to do this. Otherwise, probably they wouldn't know what to do when it comes to exchanging peer feedback. So I'm using the tool for pedagogical purposes. For example, this is a student portfolio. At the end of the semester, the student first asks a review assignment and then submits revisions, as you see here, and then exchange peer feedback. And then it is also possible to include self-feedback with reference to the rubric. So before lecturer scoring the assignment, the student may check, you may use the rubric as a checklist for the assignment. So as you see, that's what we understand from process writing. I am not simply focusing on the final assignment. Instead, I am trying to understand how the student progresses throughout the semester. This is very important. And when it comes to scoring each student at the end of the semester, it is very important to appreciate the students' efforts in providing peer feedback. When we ask our students to provide peer feedback, it means that they will be spending time to provide peer feedback, and they will be contributing to their friend's paper. So we need to take this into consideration when it comes to scoring their performances. For example, I give 60% to the paper that they submit. And what about the rest 40%? It could be coming from either self-feedback or peer feedback. Let's say, for example, the student provided feedback to 3 peers. I check the feedback provided by that student. To what extent do the feedback, does the student's feedback contribute to the development? Now I check this and score this, and then take this into consideration when I score the student's performance at the end of the semester. It is very important. Now, what do I illustrate here? I am presenting plagiarism incidents in my classes, the red ones showing plagiarism. 10 years ago, a decade ago, I realized that my students were plagiarizing. I had 167 students at that time taking my writing class, academic writing class. And I realized that exactly 100 of them plagiarized in their assignments. It means that 2/3 of every student, 2/3 of my students were plagiarizing, which was unacceptable. At that time, I was not using any text matching software. So in 2011, I decided to use text matching software, benefit from text matching software. Then what happened? As you see, there is a dramatic decrease in the number of plagiarized assignments. It decreased from 100 to 30s. However, it didn't solve the problem. There are still plagiarizers, and the other problem, increased no submission. These are the students who do not submit any papers at the end of the semester. What happened? Increase, a dramatic increase, more than doubled, a dramatic increase in the number of non-submitted assignments. Why? Because these students believed that they had the intention to plagiarize. They believed that they will be catched. So they avoided submitting their papers. But as a teacher, it was not my aim, my expectation from this. I was just trying to encourage my students to become better writers. So later, what did I do? I developed this anonymous multimediated writing model. And in this model, I tried to teach them academic writing skills and encourage them to use these skills in terms of preventing plagiarism. So what do we see here? Recently, few students, 2 or 3 students every year who plagiarize, and which I believe will continue in the forthcoming semesters. So there will be such students, 2 or 3 students every year. However, it seems that following such a methodology prevents plagiarism because we have a pedagogical stance here. And I'd like to remind you here another important thing. What is this about honor codes? And here I'm referring to Makabe. Makabe is a very important figure in academic integrity. And when he registered the university, he received a package from Princeton University. It was related to honor codes. And he talks about his own experiences in terms of increasing awareness. So as institutions, we need to familiarize our students with the principles of academic integrity. This is very important. And considering the roles of universities, recent roles, we are talking about exchange opportunities, for example. We are organizing international conferences. We are exchanging staff. So there are many different levels of internationalization recently. So what do we need here? We need common understanding. That is actually why we need why we establish European network for academic integrity. We were 12 institutions from 11 different countries, and our purpose was supporting higher education institutions to work together in terms of promoting academic integrity. So we came together as 12 partners in 2016 by the help of an Erasmus Plus project. Later, European Network for Academic Integrity became a legal entity, and now we have more members. We have 33 members, including a member from Ukraine. So what do we do? From different parts of Europe and also out of Europe, because we have some other members from out of Europe. What do we try to do? We try to form a common understanding of academic integrity. Why do we need this? Because from the previous research, from previous projects, we learned that policies are important. And considering the Bologna process, for example, we are supporting student mobility, and ECTS standards. And as universities, we need to have a common platform to cooperate with each other. Here we have students and teachers at the target. We provide different types of materials, and we are providing these materials available on our webpage. I will suggest you to visit our webpage to familiarize yourself with the materials that you can use. There are ready to use materials that we provide there that you can use in your classes. We also have working groups. For example, we have an academic integrity policies working group. So if you'd like to develop institutional policies, for example, these working groups may help you. You can become a member of these groups. It doesn't require any subscription. You can directly email the leaders of each working group. And when you go to this INAI webpage, you will be directed to the related working groups, and then you can contribute to any working group. However, of course, if you like, you can become institutional members, and institutional members will have some other opportunities. They will be using the network. They will be organizing some other conferences on events and receiving our newspapers and resources regularly. We have membership option only available for institutions. For individuals, any individual may become a supporter. There is no restriction, or it doesn't require any approval by the board. But for institutions who want to become our members, they will need to fill in an application form and then submit this application form to the board, which requires approval from the board. If you'd like to receive more information about becoming a board supporter or member, you can visit our related webpage here. And here I provide some other contact information about European Network for Academic Integrity. You can subscribe to our newsletter. Every 2 months we publish this, or you can follow us on Facebook or on Twitter in order to follow related news. Okay, here are my concluding remarks, especially related to academic integrity policy development. As teachers, as educators, we need proactive, preventive, pedagogical approaches. And we need well-developed academic integrity policies. And to form well-developed policies, as European Network for Academic Integrity and as the leader of Academic Integrity Policies Group, you are more than welcome to contribute to become a member of these groups. We are ready to support your institutions here. Here are my references, and I'd like to thank you all for attending this session.